we're just going to start today with a little grounding meditation. So, I'll invite you to close your eyes as long as you're not driving and just putting your 2 feet on the floor, just sitting up with your back straight and resting your hands on your lap. Just focusing on your breath, breathing down deep into your belly, just letting the exhale come back out maybe through your mouth. And as you inhale, just breathing deep down through the belly and down into the earth, just imagining yourself connecting down to the earth below you. Just imagining a cord running down from your belly, down through your root, into the earth, connecting you with the earth below, grounding you in this space. And just breathing into that connection to the earth. And now when you feel that connection, I want you to imagine this cord now moving up through your body, up through the top of your head, and connecting to the sky above you. And just feel yourself being held between the earth and the sky. And allow that energy to come down from the sky, that inspiration, that light to come into your body. And allow these two energies to meet in your heart. Just breathing into your heart now for a few moments. And whenever you're ready, you can open your eyes. So welcome to Wolf Brothers podcast. Today's guest is Niall Graham. Niall is a men's mentor, facilitator and teacher. He offers courses, workshops, one-to-one mentoring, and he also has a community space for men called the Embodied Masculine, which I am actually a member of. And through his work, Niall helps men develop responsibility, purpose, and leadership in their lives, among many more things. So, Niall Graham, welcome to Wolf Brothers podcast.
Thank you, Cormac. It's great to be here.
So, I'd like to start off by asking, why do you do this work and why is this work important?
I do this work. There's a few reasons. I do this work primarily because of my own relationship to my own masculinity. And just to tell you a little bit about my story, like I left Ireland in 2007. And for me, I wasn't happy here. I didn't know who I was. I didn't know what I was doing with my life. And I just needed to get out for a while. I didn't even know why. And I was living in England, in a place called Embercombe in southwest of England. It's a community near Dartmoor. And there was a guy who came back. He was living in the community as well, and he was just full of vigor. And he had just told me about this initiation that he did with the Mankind Project. And so I was fascinated by this. But up until that point, I hadn't even considered what it was to be a man. I hadn't even considered like that was a question. And from like watching him and talking to him and seeing how much it had changed him, I was convinced I was like, I really want to do this. And through doing that initiation, and I know you've done this initiation as well, but I did it up in Ferez in Scotland way back 2014 now. And I was surrounded by a group of 100 guys. And I had never experienced that level of containment. I never experienced that level of safety. I'd never experienced that level of power in my day-to-day life. So it changed my understanding of who I was. And it also led me on a journey of like, I actually want to know more about what it is to be a man. So that was nearly 10 years ago now. So that journey then of 10 years of being in men's groups nearly every couple of weeks then for the last 10 years has just led me deeper and deeper into an understanding what masculinity is, how masculinity is in the world, our cultural relationship with masculinity, both in Ireland and abroad. And then just like, yeah, how masculinity has been impacted by society, how men have been impacted by society. And it just gets deeper, it gets more complex. And, you know, yeah, I find myself just in the middle of this at the moment, just like trying to explore the deeper aspects of masculinity. So it's a continuous journey that just gets deeper. So that's where I am now. And I suppose coming to a point of being happier and understanding some of my own masculinity and also knowing that there's more to learn.
Yeah, I like that. I like how you say it's just a deepening journey because
Mm,
I'm finding that myself, having done the mankind initiation back in, what was it, I think it was 2 years ago now. So 2022. And so I feel like I'm quite new on this journey of
mm,
delving into what it means to be a man.
mm,
And similar to yourself, yeah, I've always had that question kind of in the background for years, but never really looking at, the differences in what it is to be a man specifically.
mm,
On my spiritual journey or whatever you want to call it, I've just been looking at certain practices, but now it's a much more refined question of what it is to be a man. So,
mm,
and you've been a big part of that journey for me with
mm,
all of your work that you do and the one-on-one work I've done with you and the group work and the different teachings I've learned from you as well. So today I'd like to delve into, I suppose, one topic specifically that we were talking beforehand that we'd like to delve into because following on from the podcast I did with Tanishka, we started touching on the root. We kind of went into the root chakra and looking at the pan archetype, and we looked at connection to the earth, and then sexuality was a big topic that came up, and that's what we both feel would be a good topic to go into, is that sexual piece around what it means to be fully in our sexuality as men. And I did a lot of work with you around this last year, and maybe we can, I can touch on some of my own experience, and then we can touch on the practices and the teachings and just go deeper into that topic. But I
sure.
suppose, yeah, to start off with it, what is the relationship with sexuality that you see in the majority of men in Ireland, maybe that you come across? Like, I know it's particularly interesting relationship we have here in Ireland with sexuality. So what do you see as the kind of main thing that how men relate to it in Ireland, or is it different for every man?
I think like there's for me there's always a cultural story around this stuff. So yes, we have our own individual difficulties with these subjects, but there's always that cultural thing, and in a lot of the teachings they talk about, in indigenous teachings, they talk about the relationship between people on the land. So whenever we're living in a particular place, then there is a cultural story about a particular wound or about a particular subject. So definitely in Ireland, like shame is such a massive. I speak a lot about shame because I'm constantly like discovering more areas of myself that I have shamed or that have been shamed in me, in the family environment. So shame is kind of the one thing that seems to be a kind of in our culture in general, but definitely around sexuality, because shame was the way that the church then kept us compliant. It was when we were shut down from, and this is what I mean when we talk about the complexity of this subject, because sexuality is very much related to the body, and the body is very much related to earth. And so the earth is very much related to the feminine. So in the kind of modern spiritual teachings, especially the Roman Catholic Church, it was very much about saying that the body, sexuality, that the feminine was all bad. You know, anything that was related to the down or the descent was bad. So it was a way of disconnecting us from our own sexuality. So I know even for myself, then giving an example, like whenever I was in my 20s or my 30s, I had shamed my own sexuality so much that in a conversation or being around other people, then I would shut down my sexuality because it wasn't safe. It wasn't safe to be able to feel my own sexuality around other people and also just in my own family environment. I don't want to say too much about it, but I think that a lot of families, because sexuality has been so shamed in Ireland, then we have this repressed sexuality. And what Jung says about anything that's repressed or like kept down in the psyche, and what I do a lot of work with, you know yourself, in the shadow, is whatever goes into shadow, then it doesn't go away. It comes out in different forms. So that's expressed then through pornography, or it's expressed through kind of weirdness or like creepiness, you know? And so sometimes we're in environments with other people where we feel this like unowned sexual energy which is coming out, or this like this on discomfort in the field, you know? So it's like when sexuality then is shamed, then it's not owned. And if it's not owned, then it starts to kind of express itself in different ways. So for me, then I had a bad relationship with sexual energy. I To experience sexual energy was dangerous. To express sexual energy was dangerous, and I would feel like this sexual energy, which was either put on me or around me, that I didn't want to be part of. So I think that there's a real just a deep shutting down of sexual energy in society in general because A, it's shamed, and B, because a lot of us have experienced like sexual abuse, have experienced sexual wounding. And if we haven't experienced it physically, we have experienced it psychically. I would bet that there is no person on this land who haven't experienced some sort of violation sexually. I remember whenever I was in my 20s that I was working in a cafe in Belfast and I was leaning over the bar to get a cup, and this person who was, I think she identified as a she, but she had been born a male, grabbed me from behind and put her hand between my legs, like up to my testicles. And like that was a straight violation for me. But for as a man in this country, I had never been violated before, you know? And apart from like having to deal with that situation, what it taught me was the violation and the righteousness that some people feel that they have over another person's sexuality, do you know?
Mm.
So we
Yeah.
don't have a healthy relationship with sexuality, and then these things happen in society. So like they're just kind of giving examples of like how sexuality is shamed, how sexuality then is used to abuse other people. But I think I just want to say like the really big piece for me is the psychic abuse, you know, like how
Mm.
sexuality in the psychic field is put on women. You know, I see that a lot. I think for men we receive this less, but this because we don't own our healthy sexual energy, it's put out and it hangs around in the atmosphere, and that means that everybody shuts down to sexual energy, you know?
Okay, so yeah, just on that, how does that psychic energy affect women? So you're like, say if it's being put out there just for this example by a man who's not owning his sexual energy and he's unconsciously, putting it out there, how does that actually work? Like what's going on there and how does it affect the woman?
Well, it's not for me to say what happens for women, but
Mm.
I do know, like, I think the more sensitive that I become in myself, so we can go back to the idea of like there's creepy vibes off this guy, you know? So, and I'd love to actually speak to women around this. So, whenever we don't own all of ourselves, so if I don't own a piece of my shadow, I don't own my anger.
Mm.
So, for instance, if I'm having a conversation with somebody and they're saying, "Oh, I don't feel angry," but actually in my body and my energy system, I can feel their anger because we have this felt sense. You know, we are energetic beings. We have this capacity to feel what is going on for another person. So, for instance, if a woman is having a conversation with a man and he's not owning his sexual desires, or he's not owning that he has this attraction towards this woman, or he is sexually attracted towards this woman, she will feel it in her energy field.
Mm,
And if she's not aware of it in her energy field, it doesn't mean that her system doesn't feel it at all. It's just that she's not registering it, you know? So the
mm,
more that we live in these environments, or we like, yeah, create these environments where sexuality isn't understood or owned, then we create more situations where sexuality then is shut down, you know, because we don't trust sexual energy. And like that's,
mm,
I will say for me, like that's my experience, because sexual energy was so disowned in my family when I was growing up. It was dangerous. And there's still a part of me that feels like it's dangerous. I don't feel like in my system that I can fully express my sexual energy, you know, whenever I'm at home, or I can't even be in it. So I shut it down, you know. So I think this is quite a common experience in Ireland.
yes. Yeah, and I suppose it's for, I suppose just from what I've heard from other women, I suppose they feel safer around certain men as opposed to other men, and
Yeah,
not necessarily based on anything they say or anything they do. It's just a
yeah,
presence that you
yeah,
hold. So it's,
yeah,
if they're, if you're a man who is denying lots of this sexual energy that's there, and you're just trying to put on this facade and saying the right things and doing the right things, I'd say other women will still feel that,
yeah,
yeah, unconscious thing that's going on, and they'll feel not safe. Yes, so
yeah, yeah.
um,
And I think it's important to start naming that we are very sensitive creatures. You know, the more work that we're doing, whatever practices that may be, and really to start owning this instinct, you know, really start owning this is what I feel, and that we're moving away from this rationality of like, well, I'm not doing this thing, and the other person is saying, but I feel this, you know, that we really start to um yeah, acknowledge that this is an important part of humanity, and actually this becomes the compass for us to understand ourselves more, of really trusting this instinct, really trusting my intuition is telling me whatever. And that's for men and women, you know, but I do know that women are super sensitive. So whatever we're putting out there as men, they're going to pick up on it.
yes, and yeah, I remember after I was doing one-on-one mentorship with you for about 3 months last year, and we did a lot of work around, my sexual energy and just connecting to my sexuality, and I had a lot of shame and, yeah, a lot of disowned aspects as well. And I remember then when I went to India after that to visit my girlfriend Megan, and the presence alone that I was bringing there was just like, she felt it. She just felt there was just a new depth of presence that I was bringing, and then
Mm,
she was able to just open up so much more and feel so much
mm,
safer. Not that she didn't feel safe, but just feel she could really open to me because I was so present. And yeah, it
mm.
was beautiful for our relationship. And it was all the work that I was doing that, obviously she was doing her own work as well, but I could bring that level of presence, and she could, drop more into that. And so yeah, I can kind of understand. I've seen the impact of this work firsthand. So
Yeah. I just maybe I can continue on with that. Just the last
yeah,
question that you asked as well. I think when we think back to, so I'm 45 years old now, but in my, say, teenage years, there was a lot of this, like, encouraging men to have sex with women, encouraging men to like date lots of women, you know, or that whole thing of like having notches in your bedpost, you know. So the conquest of women was something that was how men got their badge of honor, you know. So there's something about also, you know, and I've worked with a lot of men around sexuality in Ireland, you know, and it's not something that I particularly focus on, but it's always something that comes up in our sessions, you know, and that's a common thing that men have used and abused their penis or their cock or their sexuality for egotistical uses, you know. There's that lack of care for women, and it's just about like that macho sense of like wanting to sleep with as many women as possible, you know? And that's from a an immature ego. It's from us like not reaching a point in ourselves as men where we have enough self-esteem to be able to be interacting from a place of care, from a case of love, you know. And I really see that because then men dissociate then from their sexuality, they dissociate from their penis because it's been used in a wrong way. And at some point we gain a conscience and go like, I don't want to be doing that anymore. But that shame has already been logged into the system. And we've already dissociated ourselves because, you know, when we go back to these ideas of like, I don't want to be thinking with my cock, you know, which is basically, I don't want to be having sex with people just for the sake of having sex with people. But the way that we get over that, instead of like integrating and coming to understand our sexual energy more and integrating our heart, our sense of compassion, our sense of connection with our heart, we dismiss our cock. We don't want to think with our cocks anymore. So we go up to our rational thinking. So what does that do? It disconnects us from our cock even more. What does that do? It means our sexual energy then is expressed in more disowned ways, you know? So it's also understanding that a part of the healing here is re-relating to our cock, is to like coming back to a healthy relationship with our sexuality, a healthy relationship. And that involves coming into connection, into awareness with our cock, you know, and, you know, not to say much about our sessions, but also just recognizing that our cock has a particular energy, it's our directive force, and our heart has a particular energy as well, an energy of connection. So we need to be bringing both these aspects of self together for us to be able to have healthy sexual relationships, that we're not just listening to the cock in its desire to want to penetrate or to want to connect in that way, but that we're also integrating that with our heart. Like, what is my connection with this person? What is my connection with myself? So that's part of the healing here, is wanting to kind of heal that connection between our cock and our heart, recognizing that there are two different forces that need to be in harmony as opposed to separated.
Yes, yeah, that's a great point. And yeah, I suppose in those sessions with you, I did really see the power of making that connection and how
Mm,
disconnected I had become because I was what you said there, seeking self worth from, sleeping with like as many women as you sleep with is basically how high your self worth goes.
yeah,
But you're still always chasing more and more. And
yeah,
I did that for a few years, a good few years in my 20s. And I know lots of men that do that. And
yeah,
um, then it came the time when I realized I needed to, yeah, start to move into the heart. But as you said, then I disconnected from my cock and shamed it. So it's, yeah, reintegrating those two aspects for men is so important. And I think like lots of us, we can kind of get stuck on, just going into the heart stuff and the head and all these practices, like spiritual practices such as meditation and stuff like that, which are great. But um, I think this topic is so important because we need to also connect back to our balls, not just for our intimate relationships, but also for connecting to our own personal power. So maybe you could speak to that as to, you know, why do you think, like, do you think it was a purposeful disconnection from, you know, from our sexuality by, say, the church or colonialism? And what happens in terms of our personal power when we connect back to that?
deep, deep questions.
Yeah.
I go through my own um ideas around how much of what is happening in society now is deliberate and how much is just how we're kind of evolving. You know, there's this slow separation from any sense of healthiness, you know. So it's like this whole idea of like, is the Illuminati doing all this, you know, deliberately, or is it just that we are, you know, however we have come to that we are slowly disconnecting? I definitely know that sexuality, like, well, I personally feel in myself that sexuality was deliberately targeted as a way of shutting us down. You know, like as I listened to the podcast with Tanishka, you know, and she mentioned that as well. It's like if men are disconnected from their sexuality, if we're disconnected from our balls, then we're more malleable, we're more docile and we can be coerced easier. So I think that if you're planning an attack on a system or a body of people, then you need to know where to hit them. And in terms of like disempowering or emasculating men, then you hit them in their balls. And like, what does that actually mean? So if we think about testosterone, which is like the main hormone for men, like that's the one that that's our drive, that's our sense of like get up and go. So we go through our cycles every day for testosterone is at its highest in the morning. So the testosterone then is literally produced in the testicles. Like that's where the hormones are produced. So whenever we separate men, whenever we shame sexuality, whenever we separate men from their balls, so yes, we're physically separating men from their balls, but energetically, this is what I'm more interested in. We're separating men from their balls. So for me, for instance, as a child, because my sexuality was shamed, I was brought up in a religious home. My father, he's not anymore, but he was a Methodist minister for years. But I was brought up in a very religious family. So touching myself down there, watching anyone kissing on the screen, any kind of sexual show at all was put down. So what happens then in the psyche is that we associate then the lower part of the body, we associate our balls, our dick, our cocks as being shameful. So psychically, then we disconnect from the lower half of the body. Like that's what happens because in our awareness, we're told that this part of the body is dangerous. Hell is down below. Satan lives in our, Satan is in uses Satan uses idle hands, like all the lower part of the body then is dismissed. Also within my own particular upbringing, this it may not be true for everyone, like sadness is not okay, grief is not okay, like deep kind of feelings in our lower belly of anger, of anything like that, that's all not okay. So in terms of our bodies, then we where we have permission to actually inhabit is just from the chest up. Like that was my experience for years and years and years, that I was fully disconnected from my lower body. I wasn't allowed to be down there. Everything down there was bad. And that's not to say that, my parents said to me, like, don't bring your awareness into your lower body, but it was all the teachings. It was all the religion. It was all the unconscious ways that we speak to each other. Don't be sad about that thing, or not being able to deal with grief, or whenever somebody goes into anger that we try and shut it down. They're all unconscious, subconscious ways of shutting down this part of the body because all of our power is in our belly. And we do this in Ireland. Who does he think he is standing up there making a racket? And we shame each other. We put each other down whenever anybody tries to express anything that's beyond the norm. And this is a subtle form of disempowerment. It's a subtle way that we take down men in Ireland. So yes, absolutely. Whenever we are disconnected from that connection with our balls, when we're disconnected from like specifically what I'm talking about here is the energetic connection from our balls. So whenever I started to realize how I was disconnected from the earth, I was disconnected from my body, I was disconnected from my sexuality, when I started to consciously make an effort to be in my lower body, it was hard because I was so used to floating up out of my body. I was so used to not being connected to the earth. And it was like dangerous and confronting to actually feel my sexual energy again, to feel my sexual urges again, because they're powerful urges.
Mm.
So by reconnecting to that, then it's also scary for ourselves, and we need to have some sort of structure or somebody, and this is why I started the embodied masculine, is that we can support each other to say it's okay. Whenever you experience this strong sexual urges, it's not that we have to act on them, but it's also not that we ignore them, but that we hold them. We develop relationship with them. And it's not that we have to shut down our anger, or it's not that we have to like express our anger. It's that we have to be with it and see what the anger is trying to tell us.
Mm.
So it's a very long developmental journey, which I know that you know, where we come into deep intimacy with all aspects of ourselves. And slowly through that, integrating all the parts of ourselves that have been shut down by society, that have been shut down by the church, that have been shut down by our families, we start to integrate our power again. We start to integrate our deep, healthy sexuality. We start to integrate our deep, healthy desire and want and need for connection. And that's when we really start to enter into a realm of, oh, cool, actually, there's more of me. And life becomes more interesting, you know? So, again,
Mm.
I don't know if I've fully answered your question, but just to kind of flesh it out a little bit as well, you know, we're really talking about the energetics here. And yeah, just to go into the physical part, if we're like dismissing the lower part of the body, then the testosterone, then it doesn't get it produced as well, you know? And because we're creating a society where it's more important, well, men are encouraged to be more in their hearts. And
Mm.
also, as a consequence of men's own bad relationship with their sexuality, then they put themselves into their hearts because then they don't have to deal with the parts of themselves that they don't want to deal with. So
Mm.
we're less connected to our testosterone, we're less connected to our balls, we're less connected to our like deep sexual energy. And coming back to what you said, when we're connected to that deep sexual energy, when we own that deep sexuality, it's actually very arousing for women. It's very arousing for the opposite sex because, you know, that's what the polarity piece is. So
Mm.
whenever we own and integrate our sexual energy, then it becomes healthy and we be able to use it in a way that, you know, that it becomes supportive for our partners instead of dangerous. But again, the key pieces here is the integration. Become familiar with it, understand it. But the more we're suppressing anything or saying that's not me, the more it kind of comes out in wrong ways.
Mm. Yes. Oh, you answered that question very well. And I'm currently, like, I did the practices with you last year and I was in them quite a lot. And then you fall off to certain things. So I'm getting
Mm,
back into it now, doing the sexual practices and my own with my partner and also, by myself. I think it's important
mm,
to do both. But
yeah,
I suppose, and I think I'm feeling as a result more of this power and also more anger coming up at what's
great.
going on
Yeah,
in obviously in the world. There's lots going on, but I try to focus on where I am in this country and what I believe my role is here.
yeah,
And that's kind of why it spurred me to do the podcast and get out there a bit, because I think I'm starting to see again. I'm over and back with how much of it is a planned agenda and how much of it is just we've grown into this. But I do see, like, when you're just in the heart and you're just everything's fine, the universe is perfect as it is. It's which is true in one sense, but it creates very passive people and passive
sure,
men. And
sure.
but now when I'm connecting back to that sexual energy and that anger, I'm like, okay, wait, actually, I'm here for a reason. I'm here to do work as a human, not
Sure.
just sit here and meditate all the time.
Mm,
So I think that's why I wanted to talk about this topic, is to start to reignite men into their own power. And because I just see a lot of men stuck or floating through life or just apathetic to what's going on, and or even just maybe in their hearts too much of the time. I don't know if that maybe other people will disagree with me, but I think, yeah, we're a lot of us are here to do something, and there's work to be done as well. So it's how do we tap into that healthy power?
yeah, and I think that's the important part. It's like it's not also to dismiss and say that our hearts aren't important. Our hearts are very important.
Mm.
But the thing about modern religion is it has this particular prescriptive way of one way of being. And the beauty of this work for me, the polarity work for me, and the way that I work with you and other men is recognizing that we have two pieces. We have that deep power in the belly, and we have that deep openness, compassion, and love in the heart. And that's what it is to be a whole man. It's not about us being down in our balls and then just like battling our way through life without any heart. But it's also not that we're connected to our heart at the absence of any of our guts, any of our balls, you know? We need to have both. And that's what it is to be a man. And
Mm,
unfortunately, in society, then we are, we could refer to it as toxic masculinity. It's that sense of power or power over, but it's basically power without heart.
mm,
There's no compassion there. There's a want for status, or there's a want for power, control, money at the expense of the other.
mm,
But when we really develop the capacity to be both in our balls, in our guts, being able to like stand up and say no, which is exactly what power is, power, righteous anger is the capacity to say, no, this is not okay, fuck you. But also the capacity for our heart, which is compassion, understanding that we can relate to another person. And so then we're not in that situation of power over. But what I really notice, because we haven't, coming back to what we were talking about before, there's a couple of things that come up for me around this. So sexual energy is very, very powerful energy. And I remember in school, for instance, if somebody was like angry, or if they were like, um, there was some energy of like wanting to fight or whatever. It's like, this guy just needs to have sex. He needs to fuck, he needs to get rid of this energy. So we also have this association with sexual energy that whenever we get like wound up, or we get too much energy in the system, what happens is it starts hitting on the emotions that we've been trying to ignore.
mm,
So all the anger that's in the belly, all that necessity to kind of to stand up for something or to say something or whatever, that starts to come to the surface. So the energy then from our balls, our sexual energy, our natural sexual energy, starts to hit on all the corners that we've been trying to avoid. So
mm,
we get wound up, we get frustrated, we end up either wanting to fuck, or we end up watching porn, and we end up dissipating this energy. And the key here is to recognize that it's not the sexual energy's fault. It's the fact that we haven't done the deeper work, that we haven't built the capacity to be able to work with anger. And recognizing, in the case that you're talking about, recognizing that there is righteous anger. And that's how we stand up in the world, and that's how we change things. And so that we use that energy in a healthy way, and in a way that changes society. Because going back to what we were talking about before, like if this is a planned kind of um shutting down of men, then it's very convenient then that men don't have the balls to be able to stand up whenever genocide is happening.
mm.
So we
Yeah.
become submissive, we become subjugated by the authorities, and then we all become quiet. Like it's quite clear on Instagram or Facebook that they're shutting down any narratives around Palestine, and us men are too docile to do anything about it. So we need really, part of where we need to be moving towards now is just recognizing that we need to own our power, we need to own our balls, we need to own our guts, but that's not at the expense of our heart.
Mm,
And actually, we become more heart led whenever we have that power, as well. And then we don't have to choose. I don't have to choose to be sensitive or to be strong. I don't have to choose to be compassionate or ruthless. That we're all of those things. And that's the beauty of being both men and women, that we are. Women don't have to choose just to be in their heart all the time. If they want to be self-led, getting on with shit, and creating their purpose in the world, absolutely, but that men and women, we have our own inclinations. Like for me, I like being connected to my masculine energy. I like being on purpose. I like having that energy because it drives me in the world. That's my like natural home. These are ideas from David Data. And for a woman, she may be heart led, she may be connection led, she may be relationship led. And that feels like her home. So we've also needing to kind of separate and say that men and women are different, that we have different desires in the world, but both men and women have this capacity for both to be connected to our depths. In the case of women, it's their womb, and also connected to their hearts. And for ourselves and as men is to be connected to our heart, connected to our balls and to our hearts also. So really bringing us into this like duality of life, the masculine and the feminine, they're both parts of us, the earth and the sky, they're both parts of us, and that we don't have to choose anymore. But men need to connect more to their balls, need to connect more to the lower body, because that's what's missing in the world, is a strong and healthy masculine energy.
Yes. Yeah, you brilliantly put there, and I also feel there's, yeah, we need to reframe how we look at power as well, because
Yeah.
I've heard a lot of people say like, love is the opposite of power, and I'm like, I don't agree with that, because that's
Mm,
money is the root of all evil, and all these, we're
yeah.
just disempowering ourselves by saying we don't want power, we don't want money, and it's like the rich people obviously are happy to hear that, because but like it's like love and power together is what
Yes.
changes things. Yeah,
Yes.
it's not the opposite, or it shouldn't be feared or moved away from.
And we actually get a healthy relationship when we incorporate both. Because if you say love alone, then we're missing something. If we have money alone, we're
Mm,
missing, or sorry, if we have power alone, then we're missing something. But it's the two together. That's where we find healthiness, you know? And then we're really bringing in here is that it's about embracing all of us and not choosing one or the other.
yes, and I also love how you touched on men and women and the differences, and how we can still both choose to embody more of our masculine or our feminine side, because we have both within us,
Mm,
and just giving ourselves permission to choose. I think as well, I think women have been you know done a disservice to as well, because I don't want to go into this too much, but just even sometimes the expectations on women now is to have, to obviously bring a baby into the world and have a full-time job and a full career. And
mm,
obviously if women want that, that's great, but I think there's so much pressure in society for women to literally live, like do everything that a man is doing, plus the role of motherhood. And I think it just puts that extra stress, so they have to be in their masculine more, and they can't actually drop into their feminine side when they want to. So it's bringing back that choice for everyone to, like, you don't have to meet any of these cultural expectations. It's, how do you want your relationship to look? And I know one of my good friends, like, she just loves being in her feminine, and her partner loves being in his masculine, and that just works for them. And
mm,
it's like whatever you feel works for you in your relationship, and that you
mm.
can obviously flow between the two at different times.
Yeah, I
um
like that we can flow between the two. And also,
yeah.
thankfully, I'm starting to see that there's a bit of a backlash now from women saying, like, I don't want to be this anymore. I don't want to be what they call the boss babe, or I don't want to be like career driven. Like, it's like that's a part of me, but it's not, and that's basically the consequence of a patriarchal system that women ended up, because we have, again, coming back to this duality, we have said that the masculine is more important. So how women then are seen as important in society is by taking on more of the masculine tendencies, by being successful in their careers, by earning lots of money, by
Mm.
by having status. So in a patriarchal society, then that's revered. And thankfully now a lot of women are just saying, fuck that shit. I need to come back to my own feminine, and realize who I am as a mother, and he realize who I am as a sexual being, as a being in my body. And that's the feminine in both men and women, recognizing that we are a body, that we are humans on this earth, and that we have the capacity for pleasure, we have the capacity for sexuality, all the parts in a patriarchal society that have been shut down. But thankfully women are taking that point more. But for us men, then we are men in a patriarchal society. So it's actually doubly as hard, because we're not so maybe naturally connected to that aspect of our own feminine. So we're in a patriarchal society and we're men. So this is why
Mm.
we're even more disconnected from women now, because we don't have that direction then from other men to say, and we've lost I think Tanishka talked about this in your last podcast. Men are not initiated by the feminine anymore. So the feminine is dismissed in society. So this is
Mm.
why we're doubly fucked as men now, because we're in a society, that preaches a certain way. We're also in a body that is predisposed to a certain way, but we don't have anything that brings us back into the feminine. We don't have the initiations that bring us back to the feminine. We don't have the like encouragement from society itself to bring us back into the feminine. So that's why we're disconnected from our emotions. That's why we're disconnected from our sexuality, from our body, in a
Mm.
much worse way. And this is why, what Tanishka said, which is like there's a real um crisis in men at the moment. That's what I really see. And in terms of my work, is about really encouraging this masculine and feminine aspect, that we are whole in ourselves, you know. And coming back to the sexuality piece, just to speak around the wholeness piece, like I went on a big journey once I did this initiation of like, what is it to be a man? What is masculinity? And cultivating this pole in myself, this direction, this sense of groundedness, this sense of purposes, drive, focus, clarity, all these things. But what was missing in me was my sense of feminine, my connection to my heart, my connection to intimacy. So what was acting out from that place was still a desire to connect with women, still a desire to constantly be chasing women, you know, because now I'd found this power.
Mm.
But the key to this for me was recognizing that I was still looking for something outside of myself. I was still looking for the feminine outside of myself. And I had to go on that journey of integrating my own feminine, integrating my own heart, integrating my own sexuality, my own sensuality, my own capacity to be whole in myself. And that's when we can really start to be with our partners in a healthy way, when we have cultivated that wholeness in our own selves, you know? So within this, it's not about being a better man, it's about being a whole man.
Mm.
It's about integrating all aspects of ourselves. And then when we show up to relationship, we're showing up from a whole place, as opposed to trying to find our other half or our better half, or, you know? And so this is really important as well, that we're really, again, taking these two pieces of duality and saying this is about finding this in ourselves first. This is the movement that I see both in men's work and in society at the moment, that we create a space of wholeness in ourselves first. And that's when we go to relationship. But because we
Yes.
don't have these initiations, we don't have the initiations where men were brought into the feminine, then men are going out into the world, A, not done the work around their mother wound, so they haven't separated from the mother. And they also feel like they're looking for their other half outside of themselves because they haven't done this initiation with the feminine. So we have all these men in the world looking for something from the feminine, from the mother. And we have all these women then who are in relationships with little boys who are still looking to them as mother. So we have a real crisis in society at the moment.
Yes. Yeah, it's such a big thing that you see in, like, I've seen it in my own relationship, how I
Yeah.
sometimes project mother onto my partner. And
Yeah.
I think something Tanishka mentioned before, it could have been in one of her books, but it was, how we don't take care of our own self-care. We expect our partner nearly to
Sure.
like look after us, and that's just that motherly thing. And then you see
Yeah.
it and you're like, fuck yeah, I need to actually look after myself. um but yeah, there's so much there that we could dive into, and I think we might have to do another podcast. But I suppose for
Mm.
this one, just to give men like some actual, like, okay, I'm interested now in this sexual energy and connecting to it because I see the importance of it for myself, my relationship, and for the world. So where would I start as a man if I was just maybe feeling a bit disconnected from my lower half of my body? I've done some practices, maybe meditation and stuff, but I want to connect to the lower part. What would you recommend to start with?
Uh, None of this is straightforward, you know.
Mm.
Um, I'm gonna give you everything that changed for me was based on two ideas. I'm gonna go back to sexual energy a little bit here. So it was years ago. I was in Edinburgh with a friend of mine, and she had just come back from a tantra weekend. She told me two things that changed everything for me. She said, number one, that ejaculation and orgasm are different things. I was like, what? So you can have an orgasm, or you can have like an energetic orgasm in the body without ejaculating. So we can have sex without ejaculating. So the first thing that that did for me was the realization that sex and ejaculation are different things. I can have sex without ejaculating. So ejaculation then is like, for me, whenever I ejaculate, I lose my life force energy. So the testosterone piece, the whole like um vitality or virility in the body, if I ejaculate too much, I lose that virility. So that's the first piece. And the second piece around that is recognizing that if we build up enough sexual energy in the body, and we don't move it around the body, then it has to come out. And the way it comes out then is through the penis. So we ejaculate. So recognizing that in our balls, in our perineum, the lower part of the body, that whenever we are activating sexual energy, it builds up huge amounts of power in the lower body. So what we need to be doing about that then is starting to move this energy into the body. This is where we do like Taoist practice of like the macrocosmic orbit or any other breathwork practices where we start to move the energy up into the body. So recognizing that the impact of ejaculation on our psyche, and some men may recognize this. I know for myself now, I ejaculate much less than I used to, simply because I know the impact that it has on me mentally. And I'm really not an advocate of like non-ejaculation because it becomes regimental and because, as men, we can get quite obsessive and quite numbers orientated and blah, blah, blah. But what I would say is to have more of an awareness of when we ejaculate, have more of awareness whenever we're using porn in a way just to kind of get rid of that energy and really holding on to that energy and working with that energy in the lower body and seeing what emotions are coming up. So it's really about like the somatics of this. It's about using breath work, like in the embodied masculine that I have, like there's lots of practices in there, which is about really opening up the lower part of the body. So yoga, Taoist practices like Qigong, Tai Chi, breath work itself. But I just want to say, like, all these practices like are useful in themselves, but the only thing that you really need to understand is that we need to connect to our balls.
Mm.
We need to spend time with our balls, put our hands on our balls, and ask the question, like, what is my relationship with my penis?
Mm.
Breathe into that area of the body. And the thing is, our sexual energy is a very, very tender part of us. And for us to be shamed in our sexuality, we're also shamed in our core. So it's recognizing that we have this idea that the penis or sexual energy is like the strong energy, but it's actually a very easy energy to manipulate because it's quite tender. It's connected to my, the youngest part of me. So we interact with that area in a very tender way. A lot of us, like whenever I was doing a lot of my sexual healing, is recognizing that that part of me had been shamed so badly and shut down so badly that it was a very young part of me that was constricted, that was shut down, and that I had to speak to my dick, I had to speak to my balls in a very tender way. It's okay for you to be here. Your sexual energy is welcome. Anything that you experienced in the past, I'm really sorry. So yoga, tai chi, qigong, whatever, but actually it's to develop that relationship with our sexuality. Ask that question because we have such an assumption around, we have a penis, we have sex or whatever, but we don't see our penis as being a part of us that we need to relate to. People talk about relating to their heart or relating to their guts or whatever, but we don't really talk and understand that there's a relationship between ourselves and our sexuality, and we have to cultivate that relationship. And if we don't cultivate that relationship, then the sexual energy comes out in ways that we don't want, that aren't healthy.
Mm.
So that would be my first point. Put your hands on your balls, on your penis, and really tune in to that area of the body and see what's there. And like I know for me, there was a lot of grief there. There was a lot of
Mm.
pain. There was a lot of shame that I had to work through. And also that we bring that to our partners, because there's a healing that happens within that. I know, for instance, I've done practices with women where it's called like cock worshipping, where a woman then goes to her partner and holds his cock and worships his cock because as men we've been shamed, our sexuality has been shamed. And there's reason for this as well because sexuality in society has caused a lot of damage. We think about the Me Too movement, but then we also have this unconscious projection on all men's sexuality. And in the
Mm.
same way that masculinity was shut down because there's a few men who abused masculinity, male sexuality has also been shut down and shamed because some people have been abused by this sexuality. So it's understandable. But the healing here, actually, whenever I hear a woman like encourage my sexuality, whenever I have a woman who's like connecting to my own, physical body and saying, I love your sexuality. I love how you, you know, want to approach me with this sexual energy. It changes something in us.
Mm,
So there's a
yes.
lot of healing that needs to happen in masculine sexual energy. We have shamed ourselves. We have been shamed by society, and we have been shamed by women, for a reason. But we need to start growing. All of us need to start growing up now as humans and recognize everyone's been fucked here, and that we can really support each other, especially as men and women, to really bring each other back into a state of healing again, and recognizing that many, many women have been abused by men. And as men, then it's our responsibility to really listen to that abuse and support where we can, but also that we're not punch bags. We're not
Mm,
gonna like sit back and just take, oh, you're a man, you've done all these things. There's a healthiness where both men and women have been fucked here. So it's really important for us to recognize that we've been fucked in different ways. And how do we really support each other out of this mess?
yes. Yeah, that's beautiful. And you're bringing to mind when you're talking about the cock worshipping and just my own journey. I think even just admitting that I had shame around
Yeah,
my sexuality was a huge,
yeah,
shift for me. And then like coming to you and asking you for help
yeah,
with it, like that took a lot of, you know, it was like I was avoiding it for a while because I kind of knew that was where I had to go with the work, and I just avoided it because I was so much shame there, I suppose. And you don't want to admit that
yeah,
to like other men, or and
yes,
even then admitting it to you, I didn't really know you at the time, so it wasn't too hard. But then bringing it to Megan and saying, I'm doing work around this because I just have I don't feel fully confident in it, or a bit of shame around it. So like just saying that to her as well, and she was so encouraging of me and
mm,
supportive, as you said. And then as you do these practices and connect with yourself, with your own cock, and do those meditations and energy work with it, and then bring it into the relationship. I suppose for me, it was, she knew I was doing the work, so we were able to, kind of support each other and
yeah,
be open within it. So, instead of, I think some people, like when I started looking into some of it before I met you, I was reading Mantak Chia and I was doing some of the, technical practices, but it was kind of coming from that place of, I just want to be good at this. And I wasn't integrating the heart piece. So,
yeah.
I think men can get caught up in the technicalities of it and disconnect, from their heart when they're making love with their partner. So it's like it's going to bring up a lot of vulnerabilities and a lot of, emotion maybe. But I think, my relationship has benefited from it so much that I'm, so grateful that I decided to go into this. And
Mm,
also, like I just hear sometimes, like I heard someone recently, he's only early 30s, and he was like with his partner for maybe 5 years, and he's like, oh, we don't really have sex now, that's just, that's what happens in a relationship. And I was just like they're
mm,
about to get married, and I'm just like, what are you
yeah,
talking about, you don't have
yeah,
sex?
yeah.
um because I think it does bring up a lot of stuff that we want to avoid. So it's, but when you go into that and you heal those wounds, like me and Megan have both healed a lot through just, our intimate relationship and sex. So like I think it will just deepen the relationship too.
Mm. And it's breaking out of these ideas, like you said about your friends. Oh, once you reach a certain point in your relationship, you don't have sex anymore. Or that men just automatically know how to have sex with women, or how to, like what Tanishka
Yeah.
said, that we know how to like be with women. That we have all these unconscious stories around sexuality, around relationship, that we just, and we need to start questioning all that. And as you said, like having these conversations with other men. And I know for myself, like I ran a community of men for a year, and we didn't touch on sexuality. And I had to ask myself, it's like, why are we not talking about this? It's such a massive thing for men. So it's this unconscious like avoidance, as you
Yeah.
exactly said, that I have in myself, because it's actually quite a tender part of us. And I think for men, we don't speak about it enough. I think you spoke about it last time in the last podcast, that we don't speak about that with other men, and we need to break out of this now. I think that women do speak about sexual things a lot more than guys do, but we still have our like. I think again, it comes back to this. For me, it's like my cock or my relationship with my cock is actually quite a vulnerable piece for me, and so
Mm.
to be able to like share some of that vulnerability with another is hard for us as men because we have this whole thing about strong man, don't want to share these things. So I think our sexuality is quite a vulnerable part of us, and that's why we avoid it. And just to even recognize that that's the dynamic that's going on and that we can like consciously choose to talk about these things. And I love that you're talking about it with such clarity and that we're able to have this conversation in a public forum. Hopefully will give other people the permission as such to be able to talk about it as well, or talk about it with us.
Yes, and that quote comes to mind. It's like in the darkest cave is the treasure you seek, and
Yeah.
for me, it was like I don't want to look there,
Yeah.
and then I also get the vision of the stone at Tara. That's like you see in many cultures, um, they have sacred symbols of the penis because it's such a
Mm,
powerful. When we connect to it, it's the root of our power. So it
mm,
was honored in ancient cultures, and we've just gone so far away from it. But I feel it's one of the keys to reconnecting to that masculine power. And as we said earlier, it's needed in society now, that rise in healthy masculinity. And
And it's beautiful to see that, at the center of Ireland, that there's a phallus. Even if we can take that on some imaginal level in Ireland,
mm,
because I also believe that the masculine has been quite chained in this country just with our past and with colonialism and so on. If we can hold on to that vision of the phallus being at the very center of Ireland, then we can start to reclaim some of the healthy masculine that I really feel that we need here.
mm, definitely. And I suppose just we touched on the embodied masculine, and I kind of want you to. I know the next 3 months, I think you're doing a container specifically around sexuality. So do you want to maybe talk about how that's going to work? Because I'm going to be part of this as well. So um, I think it's a great time for me again to kind of go back into these practices and a bit
Mm.
deeper. So how's that going to work, or what's that going to look like?
Yeah, so the embodied masculine is an ongoing membership area for men. So as I said before, we have a lot of resources. We have Qigong practices. We have meditations, loads of teachings around masculinity. And then we meet up online then 3 times a month. So we have like a teaching, then we have an embodiment, and we also have like a connection call. So it's an opportunity, like the way I've designed it is that it's a reference point for men, that we have a place to connect in with other men, to learn with other men, and to connect in with other men. So in terms of the next 3 months, is because I suppose for me, having done this for the last year and a half, I'd like to go into a subject a little bit deeper. So over the next 3 months, then we'll look at different aspects of sexuality. So one will be about this idea of non-ejaculation or ejaculation choice. Another one will be around testosterone. But it's the primary point of this is just to have conversations around sexuality, because loads of us as men, as we've just talked about, don't talk about this, and we don't have a safe space to be able to talk about this. So it's just to really just open that conversation, give some useful ideas around our sexuality, and give us the capacity to think about it. And we're also going to do, like, for a month, an accountability piece around those men who want to try to not ejaculate for a month, just to see what happens. We have to try these things and see how it is. And so it's an opportunity then to like really bring that back to the container and go like, well, this is what I experienced. This is what was going on for me. This is what I really noticed. I noticed the difference in my vitality, or I noticed I was very irritable a lot of the time, or I was very horny a lot of the time. But that we learn that together, because for me, a large part of healing is to be working with other men, to be learning with other men. And ultimately, as I said before, what's happening is that we learn with women as well, but we learn in groups. I think this whole like
Mm,
learning ourselves, thankfully, is coming to an end now. And we're starting to realize that we are multi-dimensional beings and that we learn a lot quicker in groups, you know,
Mm.
and if we can learn to hold ourselves in groups more. I think for a while there was a people were getting lost in relationships and getting lost in groups and so on. We didn't have a healthy sense of what community is. But now that we're starting to bring in these two aspects of like, I'm an individual and also I want to be part of community, then we can really start to interact with communities and learn through communities more. And this is what I'm really trying to support at the moment is bringing groups together and that we learn together through that field. I think it's called a morphogenic field. Rupert Sheldrake talks about. I love working with that because we catalyze our whole growth. So that's the function of the embodied masculine is that we have a place, we have a field that we're part of that we can learn healthy masculinity more because the community that we're involved in that really supports us either to, you know, grow into something or to get worse at something, you know? If we're in our
Yes.
family environment, we will fall into that way of being again. So we need these places that we have a reference point for us to be able to live a different way. So the group field now is really important, and that's happening in society. And I know through shadow hunters, I think you did shadow hunters as well. We were all changed by that because we were in this group field, and that's how we catalyze growth so quickly.
Yes. I was going to mention that the
Yeah,
Shadow Hunters group because like I'm quite self-directed in my learning and I love learning and I delve into many different areas. I'm trying to narrow it down now. I'm getting quite clear on, I think we
yeah,
talked about this ourselves, but like it's good to kind of expand the fields you're looking at and then at a certain point you kind of realize this is what I need to focus on. So I'm kind of
yes,
narrowing in on men's work and shamanism and breath work and things. But I suppose despite being so disciplined and self-directed, I still will avoid, the sexual piece because it's, unconsciously I'll avoid it. So I, wanted to just jump back into shadow hunters and go into the shadow aspects that I've been avoiding. And then with the embodied masculine, be in that container, supported by the community and be held accountable, in a healthy way where, men sharpen men, like we all raise each other up
yeah,
because, you want to, you know, be part of the group and you don't want to be the one who's not engaging or not doing it properly. So like even for me doing the ejaculation choice, like I have done it for a while. I think I did it for a month before, but again I've kind of slipped off that, so that'll be good to kind of get me going again. So I think what you're saying there about the group work, like you learn so much from the other
yeah,
members of the group.
yeah,
It's a beautiful, I think it's great to do your own study and make sure you're not getting sucked in to the group and losing
yeah,
that individual or that individualism. But yeah, it's as you said there, having both. It's like I know what my specific thing is, and I'm
yeah,
part of this group that supports me.
yeah,
Um, but yeah, I think just from being in shadow hunters and doing the work with you and being in these spaces, there's so much to be gained. And like I've spoke about this before, what I tried to share what I got from shadow hunters, but I don't even think it's fully describable because there's just so much shift in those
yeah,
9 weeks and so much learning from that field you're speaking about. I can't remember the name of it, but it's just embodied learning that you're not even aware of
yeah,
consciously. So it
yeah.
just changes you.
And you know, and that's the beauty of this work. And I'm starting to realize that the more containers that we create, this is kind of going off subject a little bit, but we're creating other worlds. And for
Mm,
the 15 of us to be in this field, like that's a world that we created for those
mm,
9 weeks.
mm,
So within that world, then we all just were catalyzed, you know? And so just recognizing the power of these group fields and the impact they have on everyone, you know, and obviously I was impacted as well. I was very aware that I was the one who birthed it, but I was also in that group.
mm,
So just to recognize the importance of group work at the moment. And yes, as you said, like individual work is important as well, but there is something magical about being able to create an actual world that
mm,
that everybody is changed by, you know, for a certain period of time. And that's why I think like doing courses for X amount of time is really useful for people
mm,
because we go into that world for a time and then we leave that world, you know. And there's something just really important about that. For years I worked on my own But now I actually like working with a group of other people as well because we're all affected by the field. So that's just like it's because for me, I'm really just embracing the magic of life now. And this is what the magic that we can do. The more we can name the magic, because if you have like 200 people, for instance, in a group together, the morphogenic field that we can create, that's when it has an effect on the bigger consciousness, you know? And ultimately,
Yes.
all we're looking for here in society, in the world, is that we're, going back to the 100 monkeys theory, we're just looking for a tipping point. Enough people
Mhm.
get catalyzed, awakened, and activated will change everything, you know? And many people are talking about what's happening in Palestine at the moment as being this like pivotal moment of awakening for the world. And those poor people who are dying every fucking day, but we have a responsibility to be waking up from this, you know? If that is there, if that's the function of this, then we have a responsibility to wake up.
Yes. Wake up and clean up and grow up and
Grow
do all
up.
those.
Grow up is a really good thing as well. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. And growing up means that we are responsible for our world, not just our own inner worlds, that we're responsible for the greater world, for our communities, for our cultures, for our
Mm.
land. Like that's what it is to be a whole man for me. Sexuality is an important part of this bigger puzzle, but ultimately my work, and you know this yourself, is about becoming adult, about becoming responsible, about seeing that we're a steward of this land and that we take
Mhm.
care of each other as humans and we give a fuck about people on the other side of the world, that they are our brothers and sisters, that we know that deeply within our own hearts and our own beings, that these are other humans that we need to take care of, whatever way that we need to do that, you know?
Mm. Yes. Yeah. Inspiring stuff. And I suppose, in terms of your own personal mission, what would you say that is at the moment?
My mission is to activate men because
Mm.
that's what we're missing, healthy men. My
Mm.
mission is to activate men into their own power, whatever that is for them. And once men are activated and they start taking their place in this great change that's happening, then things will change quicker. But too many men have been emasculated, castrated from this system. And I just want to say to all men, you're powerful. It doesn't matter what you're struggling with at the moment. And even 10 years ago, I was struggling. I didn't know what I was doing. I was directionless. I was living in England. I had no idea what I was doing over there. And at some point, I was like, I need to go and face all my shit. I need to come back to Ireland, face my own disconnection from my own masculinity, from my own sense of Irishness. I had to deal with my shadow. But 10 years later, I'm powerful, you know? I know what I'm doing. I'm on mission. And for me, like, I'm changing people's lives. And I just want to say, like, it's not you that's fucked, it's the system that's fucked.
Mm.
And it's hard to find health within this system. We don't naturally find health now because we are in a society where we're watching porn and wanking every day and scrolling on social media and eating terrible food, from cheap supermarkets. So for anybody to like find their own sense of power and masculinity in these times, like fucking hats off to you.
Yeah.
It's hard. It's really, really hard. But we really need to. We need, that's my job is to say to men, we're okay. The reason we're in this shit is because society has put us in this shit. But we have a choice now.
Mm.
We go deep into the body. We find our balls again. We start eating well. We start sleeping well. We stop like drinking and doing all the things that are like holding us back. And there's a
Mhm.
beautiful life out there. Like, I think, in the last call we had for Shadow Hunters there last week, one of the guys on there, I was asking him, what had changed in him in the last three to 6 months. And he said, contentment, you know,
Mm.
and that's a real joy for me that a man feels content. He is on
Yeah.
his purpose. He knows what he's doing, but he's relaxed in himself. His relationship is going well. He's content in life. He's no longer struggling, striving, trying to like
Mm.
get to a state of health. He's content. He's resourced. He's whole. He's connected. And this is what
Mm.
I'm passionate about. People working with people like yourself who is on your own path as well. That we all support each other as brothers to really rise up. I think we have a particular challenge in Ireland, and I have a particular relationship with Ireland. That I'm here for a reason. but I think it's
Mhm.
even harder here. Any man who can rise up in this country, I think, is a sterling man, you know. So that's why I'm
Mm.
here to support the men of this country and support the men aboard abroad as well to really just step into this power, because women want this as well. They want powerful
Mm.
men. They want men who are protectors, who are protecting the sacred womb, who are protecting the feminine. That's our bigger job, is to protect the
Mm.
land, is to protect women, is to protect children, you know? And women want
Yes.
this, and that they won't have to be in their masculine whenever men come back online, you know?
Yes.
So we serve everyone by coming back into our power.
Yes. And I think going back to Tanishka as well, she said it's like women want us to claim them as well and,
Yeah.
you know, step into that. And yeah, for me as well, protecting the land is just a big theme for me that's coming up as part of my mission as well.
Yeah.
So yeah, thanks for speaking to that. And also just to any man that is listening, that I believe like your pain, wherever your pain is, that's where your power is. So it's like when
Sure.
you go into that and unlock that, you know, that's going to unlock serious power.
And one of the biggest pains is isolation, you know, and to
Mm.
reach out to other men, reach out to spaces. And,
Mm.
you know, sometimes I have to step beyond my own, like, ah, fuck it, I can't be arsed, and
Yeah.
actually go into those spaces. Because when we make that choice, when we step into those realms of discomfort, as you say, that's when things change. And it's a hard
Yes.
journey, you know, but looking back now, like
Mm.
all those times I challenged myself, or all those times you challenged yourself, we see the results of that now.
Yes. Yeah. It's a tough journey, but definitely worth it, I
It's
think.
definitely worth it. Yeah.
Um,
100%.
yeah. So, and I do feel there's something happening in Ireland now with
Yeah.
men's work is starting to take off. So I think, yeah, it'll be interesting over the next few years to see how it evolves. But yeah, I just wanted to say thanks for all the work you do, Niall, and I've got so much from it myself, and I know so many other men have as well. So I'm delighted to have had you on the podcast today just to talk a bit about it. And we only touched on one subject really, but there's so much wisdom that you have, and so much that you know I've learned, and I'm sure we'll learn in the future. And I'll put in links to the embodied masculine and some of your other work as well. If there's anything, is there anything else coming up soon in terms of in-person stuff or any other courses coming up?
Well, yeah. Well, first of all, I want to say thank you so much, you know, and I've so enjoyed getting to know you over the last year and working with you, and you know, on that last Shadowhunters call, just seeing all these guys who are activated in this country and just being like, yes, we're doing this, you know. So and thank you for hosting this podcast and inviting me on, you know, to share. Yeah, the one of the biggest pieces of my own work obviously is how do we activate men, and the thing for me that was really missing was what I talked about earlier, which is around this initiation, and how any of the initiations that I ever did was only being initiated by other men, and it was also only being initiated into this Western psychology of masculinity, which is the lover warrior magician king. So from September, I'm going to be doing an initiation where I have a woman who's going to be initiating men into the feminine mysteries. And in the indigenous teachings or the indigenous initiations, as Tanishka talked about, you know, men were always initiated into the feminine wisdom. And so this is one of the first courses that I see where this is actually happening. So I'm very excited to have this woman on board. She works with the womb, she works with the pelvic floor, and for her to be bringing in this piece of bringing men on this journey of understanding the feminine mysteries, because that's the piece. We all need to go through the womb of the woman now to emerge on the other side. We all need to be rebirthed into our full humans, and that's through the womb, that's through Mother Nature. So that's just something I'm very excited about. It's a 12-week course from September, and I have no idea what it's going to be. But this is coming back to what I was saying earlier on. It's like this is the magic when we really step into this magic of it's not about understanding techniques of being a man. It's about creating these sacred spaces where we start to emerge into the fullness of ourselves, but not without effort. Of course, there's effort, but because we're in these like magical spaces or sacred spaces, that these we just get changed by being in these containers. So I'm very
Mm.
grateful for her to be willing to step into initiating men and with all her wisdom that she's going to bring as well, and that we'll both be running this initiation for men together.
Yeah, it sounds amazing. I'm looking forward to joining as well. So,
Mhm.
but yeah, I'll put all the links and details in the show notes or the description, and people can find it there. But yeah, is there anything we wanted to say before we finish, Niall?
Um, no, I just want to thank you again for the opportunity of being here and speaking about these things. It's all very well rattling around my head, but actually putting it into coherent words is sometimes difficult. So, yeah, and just
No.
appreciating all the work that you're doing here and how the Wolf Academy is also like putting its work out in with younger people in the world, and that's so important as well. And recognizing that we all have a job in this big fuck off village that we're all part of, and yeah, just the importance of that. So thank you.
Yeah, thanks for that, Niall.
Mm.
Um, but yeah, I look forward to having another chat with you on this podcast sometime because I think we've other topics to go into in the future. But
Sure,
for now, thanks very much, and I will, yeah, talk to you soon.
you're welcome. Thank you.